guys, and welcome back to a brand new episode of Level Up with Lou with your girl Lou Only. Thank you guys so much for listening to the last episode and for your feedback and encouragement. Because I know I share content all the time, and it's difficult sometimes as a content creator to feel supported. So I'm just really glad you guys support the content, and I'm glad you guys are listening and gaining something from it. Today's guests, oh my gosh, I'm so excited for this episode, guys. Today's guests are amazing. I've been looking at all their podcast episodes, their YouTube videos. I've been looking at their blog, and they have so much to say. So I'm really interested in what they have to say today. Today's guests are Jáchym and Natasha, relationship experts and the creators of the exceptional relationship formula, which was created to help heal couples and bring back intimacy, love, and connection. Guys, they've been together for 10 years and they've been married for 6, and they've learned so much about relationships, which they wish to share with us today. Guys, how are you doing today?
Very good, very good.
Great.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the episode. I'm really excited to speak with you and just learn a lot about you and about relationships and your experiences. So thank you so much for coming on today. Where are you guys recording from?
We are in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, but neither of us are from this country.
Oh, that's amazing, guys. I was actually quite interested into how you even got to Malaysia itself. Do you want to just tell us a bit about your story? Because I know you guys are from different parts of the world. Natasha, I feel like you're from Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And Jáchym, you're from, is it Switzerland?
Yeah, Switzerland. Yeah.
Yes, oh, I remembered. Yeah, so just tell us a bit about, how you even got to Malaysia in the beginning, how you even met each other, because I know your story is really interesting.
Yeah, our beginning is pretty wild. So I'm Canadian, and we met, when we were quite young, really, and we were really, really different people back then, almost like polar opposites. Like, I was really bubbly and optimistic and wanted to save the world, and Jáchym was actually extremely pessimistic, which you will not get in this episode because he's changed so much in the last decade. But both of us, we were really different back then. But anyways, we met really by chance. We weren't supposed to, but we were both transferring at London Heathrow Airport. And it was at that time of year where it just snowed a tiny bit and everything shut down. So we weren't meant to go to the same destination. We weren't coming from the same places. We weren't even supposed to share the same flight at all, just transiting through that airport. But somehow I managed to sit down next to him, and we ended up spending a solid 3 days together. And we were really stuck because we couldn't leave, we couldn't fly, there was nowhere to go. So he's just like, okay, I'm going to go to central London. I need a shower. I need to sleep. And he's like, you either come with me or you stay here by yourself, at the airport. And it was my first time ever going to Europe. So I was like, oh no, this stranger hasn't killed me in the last 24 hours. So I might as well just, keep this companion. So I did. And we kind of bonded through that very stressful, unexpected time. But since then, we've been, we did long distance for a few years. I moved to Switzerland. We were doing the digital nomad thing for the last 2 years, and we decided to actually settle here in Malaysia for the next while. So we've been pinballing all over the world, and it just turns out that we're here.
A lot of people think, you mentioned something interesting actually. A lot of people think that as time goes on, as a long-term relationship carries on, you start to get comfortable, it becomes boring. What are some common myths about healthy relationships that people believe that you just think, no, actually, this is not true? There's a better way to do things. What do you guys think?
Well, you already started out quite in a good direction. Other myths that and here's the thing. So we have to distinguish. Okay, so myths are often what people think is normal. People are always like, well, is this normal? Is that normal? It's like, look, if the entire society is obese, would you think it's normal to obese? It doesn't matter anymore because it's not healthy. It's not what you want. And so we're trying to help people see, well, there's actually so much more possible. And so
Definitely.
one myth is that a relationship deteriorates. You know, you get onto the honeymoon, this is as high as it gets, and from there it kind of is starting to go downhill. And it has that impression because there is a period where this can happen. So you get onto your high, and it's emotionally, it's hormonally driven, right? You are on your hormones, and eventually that wears off. And when it wears off, you start to look at the other person, and some of the things that you thought were funny or whatever start to be annoying, and you have to figure out how you're going to live together. And, you know, it becomes a much more a conscious choice whether you want to stay together or not. And so when this period happens, often what comes up is like a power struggle, that you are trying to reassert your independence, and the other person is trying to reassert their independence and how things are done. And so you're kind of in this power struggle, and many people don't go past this, which is why there's this myth that this is basically it, you know. So okay, we're just going to be bickering and nagging and have those disagreements and all of that. But that's not true. You can actually make it through that phase, and when you come out at the other end, it's so much better. It's better than the honeymoon, because it is a conscious choice of loving the person, and the depth and the richness with which you can meet the person is much greater than what you can do in the honeymoon, right? So that is one of the very big myths that we're trying to dispel. And within that, of course, are smaller myths like, you know, we old couples just bicker. Nagging is normal. Criticizing is normal. It's normal that you have blame happening in the relationship and all of those things. And it's like, yeah, it can go through a period like that, and you can make a conscious choice to not have those patterns play out in your relationship, not to suppress them. Okay, this is important, not to suppress them, but to actually look at them, learn from them, and move on, and learn to interact with each other in a way that's empowering instead of disempowering. Okay, and then what happens is you start to lift each other up. It becomes an upward spiral rather than a downward spiral, which many couples find themselves in. The one thing that's misunderstood about boundaries is that we think we dream them up. So I just sit down and figure out my boundaries. No, you don't figure them out, you feel them. Okay, you feel your boundaries. It is something that's innate within you, and it takes an honesty to feel them. Okay, it's not just something I just sit down and think about. It's very, very different when I just make a list of things that are not okay, and actually emotionally connecting to it and feeling what impact it has when someone is talking over me, or when someone is being disrespectful in some way, or when someone is, you know, not sensitive towards my feeling. How is that? What's the impact? Okay, that's the very first step, and it's the most important step, because if you're not in touch with it, you can't communicate it. All you have is empty words, because you yourself are not in touch with your emotions, where the boundaries are actually coming from. And so that's what Natasha was trying to share, right? Is that only when she fully opened up and really showed what's happening within her did I properly recognize it. And that's the same thing that can happen, you know, when it comes to boundaries. Is if you're just with your mind showing up in the conversation, the other person is not going to get you, because there's no heart in it. There's no substance to it. The boundaries have substance within them, and so that is something that's really vital, and that you don't really read too much about, because yes, you can have the how to sit down with someone and talk to about it, but if you don't have the firepower behind it, it will not make a difference. Okay, and so once you have that, once you are in touch with what's going on, what's happened, then it is actually the time to communicate them with your partner. And the way you can do that is just through conversation. You know, sometimes it's not a good idea to be like, you know, can we have a talk? Because the other person is going to be like, red alert, red alert, red alert, something's wrong, I screwed up. You know, and they're going to be on being defensive or something like that. So it may be better to kind of have a, you know, you go for a walk or something like that, and you can bring something like this up. You know, it is within the conversation, within being connected. So I always look for connection first, Again, we come back to that connection piece before you go into, okay, what's actually happening. And then once we have the boundary and we have the impact it has on us, that is what we want to communicate. So we don't want to communicate, well, you are doing that and this is wrong and you shouldn't do that and why are you treating me like that and all of that. Because what that is doing is you're attacking the other person. For the other person to take this as the interpretation that they will have, like, well, I'm doing something wrong, it's bad. Even if you're sharing and you're coming from, I feel when you're talking louder or whatever, I feel scared. I feel scared inside, and I don't know what to do. Even saying that, they can feel attacked, but that's okay. But at least you're staying with your experience and you're staying with what's happening with you, and you're showing up as yourself and you're opening yourself up to what's actually true so that the other person can see it, because the other person might not be aware of it. Okay, you may think, well, I've told them whatever amount of time. Well, Natasha has told me many times, but it wasn't until she actually became fully open and honest that for me it clicked, right? So that's why this openness, the communication, that's another piece. Many people think communication is words. It's not. Words is just like the last 10% or whatever. It's your body language, it's your tonality, it's your pacing. There's so much happening in communication. And you can think about, oh, well, how am I showing up? Am I carrying myself right, whatever, and try to micromanage it. Well, to shortcut that, that's why we keep coming back to the thing, which is come back to your emotions. Because if you are in touch with what's happening within you, that will then show up in the entire conversation.
We often hear that the wedding is supposed to be like the best day of your life, or the most amazing thing that's ever happened. And you guys talked a lot about the honeymoon stage and, coming out of that stage where you feel like this person is the most amazing person, and, seeing, not really seeing them for who they really are, but seeing them for who you've dreamt up they could be. How do you deal with after, like, let's say, for example, like, let's say the wedding is the peak, as people say it is. How do you make your relationship better than your wedding day, better than the honeymoon stage? How do you do that? Because I feel like you guys seem to understand the importance of appreciating each other and seeing each other for who you really are. But are there any tips that you can share with people to get their relationship to a point where it's even better than the best stage that people say?
Yes, absolutely. Before we share in tips, I want to just real quick make a very short detour, and that is, you gotta understand that there's two different kinds of pleasure. One is joy. It's joyous, it's deep, it's satisfying, it's fulfilling, it's enriching, and the deeper it goes, the better it is. It's lasting. The other one is peak experiences. Peak experience, you're only going to have them once. You get your new car, you're only going to have that experience of getting a new car for the first time once, and you're never going to have that experience ever again unless you upgrade the car and get a Ferrari next time, or a jet, or a rocket or whatever, right? So you're going to keep chasing after that high because you can't sustain that high.
Yeah.
And that's a trap. That right there is what we call the pleasure trap, because you can't recreate, and so you're going down a never-ending chase. Okay, and that can happen with possessions, it can happen with partners, it can happen with sex, it can happen with all kinds of things. It's a pleasure trap. You're never going to get out of it unless you start seeing through it and see that this is not what's actually going to fulfill you. And that's the same thing with the honeymoon and the so-called best day of your life and all of that. That's usually a high. It's a pleasure high. Okay. Yeah. And once you know this distinction and you're like, okay, wait, so there's the pleasure high, but there's actually another high, which is not as a spike, but it's sustainable. Then you're like, the spike becomes unappealing. Like, that's how I experience it now. It's like, yeah, I can have the spike, but it's going to go, and then it's gone. It's like, it's not that great. But I can have that deep, joyous being and that being together, and that feels so beautiful and enriching. And so if you want to actually make your relationship better than the honeymoon, you got to get off the pleasure seeking. Okay, the pleasure trap, you got to get out of it. And you got to find the depth within the relationship that you can have when you can become still together, when you really deeply feel each other without words, without doing something, but just each other's presence. Like when you actually can connect on that deep of a level, you're like, yeah, of course I'm going to choose this versus just being on a high.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's almost like less about orchestrating the perfect whatever so that you experience something that amazing, but it's more like connecting to every single moment that you have with your partner, because each one is different. And that's why all those movies where those people get stuck on like in the Groundhog Day and that they repeat, even if it's like, oh, it's Christmas every day, or it's like the best day of our lives, the second time they're like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess I'll have more champagne again, or like I'll eat that whatever favorite cake of mine again, yay. But the 5th and the 10th and the 20th time, they're like, get me out of here. Because you don't want to experience the same thing, even though it was so great the first time. If you repeat it enough times, it's not fun. So what does that mean? That means the true joy and the happiness here is in appreciating, you know, how every day you are changing. In each moment, you're sharing something different. So in each moment that you share with your partner, there's something there, but you have to see it, you have to feel it, you have to like get into it and not be like, oh, well, nothing special, just another day and we're at home, and you know, it's like, no, you're still together. Maybe there's still love, maybe there's still care. Like, what's here between you two that you're sharing right in this moment? And can you recognize it? Like, can you actually feel that right now instead of comparing it to some kind of, you know, orchestrated thing in your head that you think you want or need? So it's like, you know, every moment you could be receiving a lot from your like relationship. But do we actually choose to feel that and see that? Yeah.
You know, hands down, the most practical thing I can give you to make your relationship better than the honeymoon is to question your thoughts. Your thoughts are not reality. And what you think about your partner is not your partner. You believe you know your partner, you don't. Okay, and this is difficult for people to understand at the beginning, but you really got to question it, because when you're together and the thought comes up, oh, you know, yes, it's not so great and I'd rather be somewhere else and all of that, and the story starts spinning and all of that. That's all thought-based. That's all thought. It's not based in reality. And most people are not in touch with reality, and they're not in touch with their partner. They're in touch with the projection about their partner. Okay, and so that is, hands down, the most practical thing you can do is question your thoughts. Become aware how trapped you are in those thoughts and thinking that you know them. Because here's the thing, every moment is unique and it will never, ever repeat.
Yeah.
Ever. But people hear that and you're like, yeah. But like, that means everything is so fleeting and your partner can die the next moment. Just like that. It's over.
Yeah.
But because we're trapped in our thought, we think it's forever and we are just in here. But, you know, it's real. A friend of mine, his brother died at 24, heart attack. Out of nowhere. He was a sports guy. Died on the field. You know, so we don't realize that because we are so trapped in thoughts and making everything habitual. And so breaking out of that habitualness, and which is based in many ways in thoughts, that is where you come back to actually being here now with that special, unique human being that you're never going to see again the same way, because they're changing and changing and changing.